أنا معايا دلوقتي عبر الهاتف سير جيرالد هاوث. سير جيرالد هاوث هو عضو البرلمان البريطاني اللي كان في مصر من حوالي 10 أيام مع مجموعة من البرلمانيين ومع الصديق العزيز سمير تكلة. التقوا بالرئيس السيسي وزاروا شرم الشيخ رغم أنف السفير البريطاني في القاهرة. Sir Howarth, you're most welcome, sir.
Good evening to you, Ossama.
Good evening, sir. First, let me get your impressions about your visit recently to Egypt.
We had an excellent visit to Egypt 2 weeks ago. 4 of us, 3 from the House of Lords, and myself as chairman of the all-party Egypt group in the United Kingdom Parliament, visited for a week. We had meetings with the President for about 2 hours. We met the Minister for Justice, Tourism, Minister of Defence, the National Security Advisor. And of course, we had a very good meeting with representatives of the Egyptian Parliament, particularly Dalia Youssef, who has just been elected chairman of the newly formed Egypt-British Parliamentary Group. So their group, as it were, mirrors ours. And we were delighted to meet them, exchange views. We met the speaker as well. And we spent a day in Sharm el-Sheikh.
How was Sharm el-Sheikh?
Well, I'd not been to Sharm el-Sheikh before. I'd heard a lot about it. I know it's very popular with my fellow countrymen. 900,000 people from Britain visit Sharm el-Sheikh every year, or did until the flights were banned. I thought it was a fantastic resort. Wonderful facilities. Beautiful waters. We had a look at the most exotic fish in the crystal clear waters of the sea, and we visited 2 of the resorts. But most importantly, we had a very useful briefing from Governor Khalid Fouda, who briefed us on the security, the new security arrangements which have been introduced at the airport and also across the town as well. And clearly, it's a great tragedy that that tourists are not visiting Sharm el-Sheikh in the numbers that they should.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me before getting more and more into our Egyptian matters and affairs, because you were one of the leaders of the endeavor for the Brexit lately, and your endeavors have been successful. How do you see your success? Did you expect that success to happen?
I thought we were going to win because for one fundamental reason, that is that when we last gave the British people a vote on this matter 40 years ago, they thought that they were voting for a common market in goods and services. It was then called the common market.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, since then, these people who thought this was a rather good idea have seen the thing change into first the European Community, now the European Union, taking on all the attributes of a nation state. So it has a flag, it has an anthem, it has a parliament, it has a ridiculous currency, it has a president, it has a foreign office in all but name. And the British people have increasingly resented having powers transferred from our parliament, where they can elect and dismiss us, being determined in Brussels. And the resentment was growing, and I felt that the time had come that they were going to say, we've had enough. And sure enough, that was the vote.
And you think the UK will emerge stronger? After how long?
I think the UK will emerge hugely stronger. We will resume our traditional role in the world, which is to help to maintain the balance of power. We will be able to sign our own trade agreements with other countries, which we are powerless to do at the moment. We will enact our own laws. But above all, we will step off this train heading to the United States of Europe. do believe that it will not only be good for Britain, I think it will be good for the continent. I think it'll be good for the rest of the EU, because that organization is born of a 1950s mentality, and the world has moved on. We now face huge competition from countries like India, from China, and the other tiger economies, and the European Union is ill-equipped to meet that competition. And so I think there will be fundamental changes. Some of them could be quite dramatic in the next few years.
All right. Wishing you and the British people all the success in taking the decision that they have decided on for the best interest of everyone within the UK. Back to Sharm el-Sheikh, and what was your impression about what you were informed from the governor with in terms of the security arrangements? Did you take back to Parliament the fact that you have felt something is improving or not yet?
Well, first and foremost, the British government set out a 26-point action plan for improving the security at Sharm el-Sheikh in the wake of the downing of the Russian
plane, yeah.
Russian plane. And I have been following this very closely right since the atrocity was committed, and I have felt that it was imperative that Egypt should implement those changes. Now, what I found was that there's been a real effort on the part of the authorities. They took us round to the what we call the air side of the airport. That is, say, away from where the passengers are. But we looked at the handling of baggage scrutiny. We thought they put in some pretty sophisticated checks there, and we think a lot has been done. But most importantly, we talked to a representative from the United Kingdom's Department for Transport, who also felt that the conditions had been met to enable flights to resume. Now, our Parliament is not sitting at the moment, but I have already been in touch with the Prime Minister's office, and indeed, I, on behalf of my group, I have written her a letter urging her to take a swift decision on this. Because, look, the Egyptians have been saying to us, we have atrocities in Paris, we have atrocities in Brussels, we had British holidaymakers murdered on the beaches of Tunisia. We haven't closed down flights to those countries. And in the climate in which we're living at the moment, I don't think anybody can say anywhere is safe. I think it's down to tourists to decide for themselves, on the best available advice, of course. Where they go on holiday. But Sharm el-Sheikh, I thought, was a wonderful resort, and I very much hope I can go back there with my wife.
Perfect. You're most welcome. We'd be happy to meet you. And we will not bother
very kind of you.
We will not bother you media-wise. We'll meet you as friends.
Very kind. Well, I was very impressed with the facilities. We only visited two, as Savoy and the Rixos Seagate, but they were really, really good. Let me just make one observation,
Sure.
which I thought was really telling, and I think Egyptian people should be proud of this, that the hoteliers there have kept the staff on, even though the occupancy rates are pretty low. They've still retained the staff because they've invested in training those staff. And I thought that was a pretty good commitment to the local workforce. And I'm very conscious that tourism contributes a huge amount to the Egyptian economy. And so my colleagues and I are working very hard to try and persuade the British government that unless there's something we don't know, then flights need to resume so that the people of Sharm el-Sheikh can make a living, the economy of Egypt can prosper, and above all, people can enjoy themselves in a wonderful resort.
Excellent. And that's a very smart observation about the workers. But unless there is something we don't know, and I guess there is something that I may not seem to understand about this report that has come out of the Home Office, in terms of granting asylum to the Muslim Brotherhood's leadership. What is your impression about that report if you've read it?
Well, I haven't seen this report yet. So, as I say, Parliament is not sitting at the moment. I've only heard sort of second-hand reports that the government has made some kind of decision to afford or to consider applications for asylum from members of the Muslim Brotherhood. All I will say is that I find it very surprising because only last December the government issued a paper to a report to Parliament in which it disclosed some of the findings of a report which was commissioned in April 2014 by then Prime Minister David Cameron.
And through Ambassador Jenkins as well.
Yeah, that's right. So this was carried out by two very senior people, former ambassador in Saudi Arabia, Sir John Jenkins, and Charles Farr, who was head of, he was Director General of the Office for Security and Counter-Terrorism at the Home Office. Two very respected people. They did a pretty substantial investigation. So John Jenkins visited 12 countries. They talked to representatives of the Muslim Brotherhood. They received a lot of representations. And they concluded at the end that basically these people do not share our values. They have resorted to violence and indeed terror. They have supported Hamas, which of course has been using suicide bombers to attack Israel. Hamas is a proscribed organization in the United Kingdom. And senior members of the Muslim Brotherhood have justified attacks on our forces in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, that seems to me to be a comprehensive indictment of the organization. But let me make this observation to you. Increasingly, I have become concerned that London is being used as a base from which dissident groups from other countries use the freedoms that we enjoy in the United Kingdom to attack those countries, many of whom we have good relations with between their governments and ours. And I think we in the United Kingdom have got to start considering how much longer we can go on affording protection to people who don't share our values and who are using London and all the security that London provides to seek to undermine their governments at home. If they don't like their governments at home, frankly, they should go back to their own countries and go and deal with their governments in those countries and not seek to hide.
Instead of importing more of them into your country.
Correct.
I could see, I mean, when the Prime Minister was the Home Secretary, she had a very strong stand about this and about such practices and the use of the UK soil and the British places in order to use them for whether it is terrorist attacks or even conspiring for the demise of other states. How come that such a report appears when she just became the Prime Minister only a few weeks ago?
The answer is I do not know, and in my letter to her, this is one of the questions obviously I've been raising. I want to know whether this is the case or not, because quite often one reads reports in the newspapers that something has happened, and actually it's speculation. It's not borne out by the facts. So I have been trying to verify this. Do emphasize, Parliament is not sitting at the moment. Most members of Parliament are on holiday. So getting accurate information when the House is not sitting is not always easy. But you're quite right. We have just elected in the Conservative Party a leader who comes to the office of Prime Minister more experienced in issues of security and intelligence than probably any previous prime minister. And at a time when international terrorism is the great scourge of our age, and in particular, Islamic fundamentalism is the most dreadful scourge of our age, we have a prime minister with serious experience in the field, 6 years as Home Secretary, one of the longest serving Home Secretaries in our recent history. And so I am hopeful that we will be able to resolve this matter, because I think the idea that people from the Muslim Brotherhood should obtain asylum here, when we have this authoritative report produced as recently as last December, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and that report even was somehow, in the opinion of some, including myself, the report in December was somehow diluted, let alone that it was. I mean, I'm sure that something. So when is Parliament convening again, the House of Commons?
We return on the 5th of September. But let me just make this observation. I mean, we were very struck in our meeting with your parliamentarians and Dalia Youssef and the Speaker and Kareem Dawish and various others, Mohammed Al-Arabi, former Foreign Minister of Egypt. We were quite struck by the strength of hostility towards the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, sitting here in Britain, it's perhaps not as easy to understand that, but if you're in Egypt and you know something of the recent history, of course, it is understandable. And I have been on the record as saying that what Mohammed Morsi was doing was done by others in the 20th century before him. Namely, he was elected on a popular mandate, but then he proceeded to, by presidential decree, to grant himself unlimited powers, and the power to legislate without judicial oversight. Now, there was a gentleman in Germany in the 1930s who obtained power and did the same.
Exactly.
And there was a leader, a president in Chile in the 1970s who did the same. And I was very struck by the way in which the Egyptian people are determined to put that behind them. You've got a vibrant parliament there, recently elected. You've got a new constitution, and whereas I read here that the president undertook a military coup d'etat, I don't think that is how it should be seen. I'm talking to Egyptians. Okay, I've not been talking to dissident Egyptians. I quite accept there is a different view, but certainly seems the majority view is that there was a plea to the army to come and help the people who'd taken to the streets in their millions. And the current president, President Sisi, promised a new constitution, promised free elections. Those have been delivered, and you have in Cairo now, you have a parliament with its own human rights committee. Well, I think they're better placed to deal with an analysis of the state of human rights in Egypt than foreign observers like myself. So, I think it's very important that
but one thing here, that the fact that you're surprised, or you were surprised about the sentiment here in Egypt when you've met with the members of parliament, weren't you informed or briefed well by the Foreign Office or by the ambassador here back home when you're in the UK about this is how Egyptians feel? Isn't it the role of the ambassador to pass on that sense or the sentiment to the Foreign Office and accordingly to the MPs?
Oh, I don't mean by that observation to suggest that somehow we had been given a false steer by the Foreign Office, or indeed by John Casson, our ambassador, with whom I have very close relations, as I have very close relations with Ambassador Nasser Kamal here in London, with whom I meet regularly and discuss matters even more regularly. But it was just, what I'm really saying is just how forceful people made the point to me, and to us, not just to me, but to all of us. And the passion which they felt in expressing those views. So, I mean, talking to your national security advisor, so, you know, what did you do during the protest? And she said, you know, she was outside the walls of the palace, along with the rest of the population. Now, I think what is going on in Egypt at the moment is really quite important. I think at the time we were there, President Sisi had announced his desire for irreligious discourse. And, of course, in Egypt, as one sees graphically in Cairo and in Sharm el-Sheikh, mosque and church stand side by side. And you have in Egypt a pluralism, a religious pluralism, which is in stark contrast to what is going on in Turkey at the moment, where you have a president who has literally overturned 90 years of established secularism, established by Kamal Ataturk in 1923. That's now been thrown overboard as Erdogan is determined to create an Islamic state, which is the last thing that I think a populous country like Turkey needs, certainly in the current climate. So you've got all of that, Turkey, NATO member, etc. By contrast, you've got Egypt seeking to ensure continuing dialogue between Muslim and Christians. Yes, there have been some problems. There have been the sacking of churches, the burning of churches, and so on.
But I mean, the burning of churches was done by the Muslim Brotherhoods and the people who had sentiment for it after the June 30th, 2013. I mean,
yeah, indeed, and obviously it is down to the present government to do its best to ensure that those who perpetrate that sort of violence are brought to justice.
Unless the UK government will grant them asylum.
Well, not if I have anything to do with it, I can assure you. I feel very strongly about it. I do want to emphasise that we just do not know the veracity of this report at the moment, but we will be seeking meetings with the Foreign Secretary and the Home Secretary when the House returns. We've already decided on that course of action, and but I want to make the point to your audience that Egypt has got quite a lot to be proud of. Yes, you went through a revolution, but you've come out the other side with a new constitution, with a president elected by the people, who, as far as I can see, is abiding entirely by the constitution. He promised to set up a parliament. You have a parliament. We've met members of that parliament. Clearly, a vibrant. It's going to be a vibrant organisation, and it seems to me in this turbulent world that Egypt deserves more support from the international community, more recognition from the international community for what it's doing. And of course, historically, Egypt is important in terms of the Arab-Israeli dispute and the stance that Egypt is taking at the moment towards the two-state solution, in marked contrast, of course, to Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood, is a positive one. And it seems to me that what we need to do in the United Kingdom is to reassess recalibrate, if you like, the priority that we attach to Egypt, particularly in the light of what is happening in Turkey. And I'm a great believer that if people are going in the right direction, that you give them support. You may disagree on issues here and there, but if people are doing the right thing, and I think Egypt is doing the right thing, and I'm very keen that we should ensure that our trade with Egypt continues to flourish. We've just, Prime Minister Cameron appointed a trade ambassador for Jeffrey Donaldson, who was recently in Egypt and is going back with a big delegation of British commercial industrial people. So, I think that we now have to be very focused in this new world order. The threat we face from militant Islam means that we have to stand shoulder to shoulder with those who are in favor of pluralism, who are in favor of democracy. That's what we have to do, and Egypt falls very, very firmly into that category.
So Gerald Howarth, I'm thanking you very much, and I'm looking forward to welcoming you personally when you come back with Mrs. Howarth and the family. You're most welcome in Egypt as friends and as people we would like to warmly welcome here at home. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Nid, and rest assured that we will be making the case very firmly about this report. And we will also be making the case that I've just set out. But thank you very much for your kind of view. And I'm only apologize for not being able to respond in Arabic.
Well, I mean, we have interpretation right now, and we're putting the Old English copy or version also on air for you to see it also on YouTube, and we'll send you the link for that.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Look forward to seeing it.
Thank you.
Okay, well, good night.
Good night, sir. طيب سير جيرالد هاورث ده راجل عضو برلمان بقاله 20 سنة من سنة 97 وهو عضو برلمان. راجل أنا حاولت ما أسألوش كتير عشان ما يبقاش فيه تدخل ولا إن أنا بزق الحوار في اتجاه ولا بمشيه في اتجاه. الراجل اتكلم على التقرير البريطاني وقال يعني إن هو ما شافوش بس هو مندهش إن التقرير ده خرج في الوقت ده. اتكلم على محمد مرسي وقال ان محمد مرسي كان منتخب. قال عندنا مثالين موجودين في التاريخ، في الثلاثينات كان في واحد في المانيا، طبعا عارفين هو كان بيتكلم على هتلر، وفي السبعينات كان في واحد موجود في شيلي بيتكلم على بينوشيه. فبيتكلم على اللي بيحصل في تركيا وبيتكلم على اردو اللي انا النهارده طبعا مش لاحق اجيب سيرته ولا اخباره عشان الموضوع اخدنا واحنا لازم نطلع للفاصل ونرجع مع ضيوفنا اللي اكيد هم موجودين بره ومنتظرين عشان يحللوا معانا هذا الموقف.